Should we get going?
Yeah.
Let's do this after.
I'm actually concerned with
All right, let's get going, guys. So, future of blockchains. You guys probably all heard of blockchain by now. You've heard of Solana, Avalanche, ADA, Ethereum. Not sure if you've heard of Syscoin, but we're going to talk about that today. Syscoin is essentially, if you've heard of Bitcoin, you've heard of Ethereum. It's kind of both of them put together. We've done a lot of diligence from 2014 to try to figure out what is the ideal blockchain, what is the ideal layer 1, what does that even mean, what is an ideal. Critical piece is, as you see the political world right now, there's a lot of issues happening, inflation and wars and monetary crisis coming up in the short term with inflation and the US dollar debasement over the last 30, 40 years especially. We are at a tipping point where people have to decide where they're going to store value long term, where they're going to do business long term. Because if you don't think about that now and you're running a company, you'll be cut out from the economy in the short term. So this is the hyper-Bitcoinization effect, people call it. Guys like Michael Saylor are saying if you don't hold Bitcoin on the books or hold crypto on the books today, you're going to be outcompeted by the market in the short term. Real negative interest rates basically coming your way as a company. So as a blockchain foundry CTO, we hold crypto on the books. We're a public company, but we are advising everyone to hold at least some for inflation protection and just protection against the debasement of fiat-based currencies. Right. So there's a lot to unpack there, but the blockchain itself is kind of the root of all the value, and then you build the value on top of that, on the application layers. So we'll show you examples of different types of applications you can build. There's a few people here actually building applications, so can get into examples of how applications could be built using the blockchain. But first you want to cover the concepts, maybe the philosophy of money a little bit, and maybe just what blockchain is and what layer 1 means. And then you get a picture of why it matters so much. And why is there a whole bunch of blockchains out there? Why not just have one? So, this is, we're going to cover a little bit of that. Hopefully, and you guys have questions, feel free to just stop and we'll try to answer. At the end of this, we're going to transition to YouTube and the AMA. There's a bunch of questions probably on there, and we'll try to answer. The guys that showed up here, we're going to give away some to the ATM and cash that out if you want, or you can go to Binance and cash that out if you want. We'll give you guys $100 for coming, and then the AMA, anyone that asks good questions, and we're going to choose the top 10, 15 questions. We're giving away $100 to those people as well. So, be prepared as you get through this presentation. If you have a question, it's a good question. We'll be, covering you for that, basically. So, you'll be paid to be here, is what I'm saying. So why is this thing even worth anything, right? We think there's a potential here. It's because if you look at the top market cap coins and the race to become an ideal layer 1, they all have really high valuation, right? They're worth a lot of money because they solve a lot of problems, and they solve specific problems. They solve smart contracts, or they're a very secure value storage like Bitcoin. But because of what the situation the world's in, how much money is floating around, all that money is either going in gold, Bitcoin, or stock market, and because of that, the bubble's getting bigger and bigger on some of these, value provenance situations where you have $1 billion coming in and it's deciding where it wants to go. It's likely going to sit in the top 5, top 6, top 10 blockchains out there. There's tokens as well, and those are not as worth as much, but the blockchains itself is where the collection of all the value comes in. So, why are we worth a little bit more than we're thinking we're worth now? Is because we got a lot of stuff coming up. We got a lot of technological innovations, a lot of solutions we've developed over the last 5, 6 to 10 years. That's all coming to a point where we're putting it to use. So up till today, we really haven't hit the marketing button. We haven't really gone to people and say, hey, you should, build on Syscoin, because we just weren't yet. We're going to go over why now is a time where we're going to get the developers to come on board and start building on top, the application side. And why maybe 5 years ago we didn't start this, and why maybe Ethereum hasn't been in this position to build on top either. We think this next 6 months to 1 year, we are going to see a very large transition of people realizing this next technological revolution that is blockchain will be as big or bigger than the internet itself. And then some of the solutions for scaling, particularly ZK technology, will be as big or bigger than the blockchain itself as well, because it could be applied outside of blockchain. So think of maybe Web 1.0 or the .com bubble, when people first created their websites and they were able to capture business online. Think of that revolution happening, but in the space of money and value and information. So anytime you can disrupt value, information, money, that market is as big or bigger than Web 1.0. We're transitioning to Web 2 and Web 3. So Web 3 is kind of what blockchain is becoming now. We'll talk a little bit about what that is. So what we're seeing in the space today is a bunch of blockchains that just pop up, right? And they're saying we are solving these critical problems. Some are really good, some are solving real world problems. Solana, you've heard of Solana, it's solving the scalability problem. We think there's a different way to solve the scalability problem. We'll talk about what that is with ZK. But there's merits in some of these blockchains, right? Like Ethereum came out with an alternative to Bitcoin. Let's not just think of money, let's think about maybe utility on blockchains. Let's think about smart contracts. How can we create a situation where we create an escrow where I send you money, we both sign on it, but only if we sign cryptographically at the same time can the money come out, right? There's no middleman in that situation. It's a blockchain, it's a smart contract on the blockchain that governs value coming out or in of that black box. So that simply was not possible before blockchain, and it's really not possible at a really adaptable level on the Bitcoin blockchain. The Bitcoin really is just money and store of value and long-term provenance of value, right? It's a very secure form of that. And Satoshi came out and said, that's all this should be, it's just money and transfer of value. Ethereum, with Vitalik, came out and said, why don't we just do a little bit more? Why don't we try to automate business processes, automate corporations in a way where we could do finance on there without all the middlemen, but just more than money, right? So Ethereum had a real concept, and the problem was it just didn't scale, right? As soon as you had people starting to use it, the fee started to go up like a lot. It's $40 to do a transfer right now. It simply is not sustainable to do everyday transactions, right? So Solana, Avalanche, ADA, these blockchains started to come out and said, we will solve that scalability problem, and we will make things really cheap and fast. Now they're making things cheap and fast in one way, and we think the industry is going a different way now. And so this is why we're really at a tipping point on the scalability matrix, if you will. And we'll cover that in another slide. So there's different ways to scale, right? There's different ways to say, once the world adopts this tech, how is it going to scale? There's one key metric that keeps sticking in my mind about scale, and it's how the internet scaled, right? It's called economies of scale. So as more people start using the technology, it's got to become cheaper and cheaper, right? This is just a general idiom of how to scale business, how to scale any type of technology. If more and more people use it, it can't get more and more expensive, right? And Bitcoin has this problem, right? But the thing with Bitcoin is it solves a critical piece of the puzzle, and that's the financial system as it stands today, and the debt-based economy that stands today, and the value storage. It doesn't want to do anything more than that, and it shouldn't do more than that. It's a binary outcome. If it solves a problem, it's really successful. If some sort of cryptographic catastrophe happens and it breaks, it's worth nothing. It's a 1 or 0 proposition. And Ethereum is more of a gray area, right? There's more things you can do, and therefore more attack vectors. And so what we're saying is, we think there's ways to scale by preserving the Bitcoin philosophy of 1 or 0 security. It's either fully secure or it's not secure, but applying it to the Ethereum model to do much more. Do more like smart cities, AI, IoT, AI. We're talking about walking around and ads popping up on our glasses, and we choose and we monetize those ads as they come up to us. A car is self-driving and it could pay for itself as it's driving, charging with electricity, and you can pay for parking. Before you even get there, you're paying with your crypto for parking. Dubai is another example of a smart city that's going. We're going to be there at the end of the month, but they're very, very progressive and transition to a smart city. So some governments are already on the ball, and they're already leveraging this technology to bring about real big change. And you go there, and it's going to be day and night compared to what life is like here or in the third world. It really is going to be first world, second world, third world, and there's these new smart city type of jurisdictions popping up. When we talk about trying to solve scalability, right? Why all these blockchains exist, they try to solve scalability. The main thing you have to deal with is security, right? You don't want the system to break if everyone's using the system with trillions of dollars of value and something happens to that system, a hacker finds a way in, a Korean state-driven attack devalues the cryptocurrency behind it. What happens with that system? It's useless, right? It's just like a database. You might as well use a database built in MySQL and putting value on there, run by someone like IBM or Microsoft. Why not just do that? If you want zero barrier of entry where anyone in the world can get involved in the system, whether they're in Africa, India, Canada, America, you have to build a system that's fully decentralized and fully secure so that even if hackers got involved or any state-driven attacks got involved, it's secure from that environment. That's why I keep saying it's, Satoshi said it's a binary outcome. It's 1 or 0. Either it's fully secure from every attack vector we can think of, including mathematicians trying to break the cryptography, or it's not secure at all, right? There's no gray area. And so we need to think about that when we're solving these problems, trying to get this thing faster and faster, more optimized, is retaining that security paradigm of 1 or 0, Satoshi's 1 or 0. Because if you introduce a gray area, then there's way more attack vectors, and maybe 15 years down the road when everyone's using this, including all the governments, and the system breaks, it's going to be chaos, right? So we need to think about how we design this right now as a layer 1 before all the layers on top start getting built out. So, we think 2 gold standards exist in the crypto ecosystem today. There's Bitcoin, which is full secure, store of value, store of information, value provenance, transfer of money, that sort of thing. And it's like gold, right? It's like gold on the blockchain. And then there's Ethereum, which is the gold standard for programmable smart money, right? I'm able to program using a smart contract what happens when you send money into this black box. You can open a door, you can open a car door, you can drive a car, you can do a whole bunch of things. You can do decentralized finance where I'm my own bank and I can lend out without any risk because the smart contract system is covering my risk, and users entering it have to collateralize themselves. So all sorts of cool opportunities, but it does open up a gray area there because there's more utility coming out of it. It's not 1 or 0. But if you apply the same fundamentals of Bitcoin and Ethereum, that's kind of what Syscoin is, right? We're saying, let's get the security of Bitcoin, but the utility of Ethereum with all that crazy smart contract stuff into one box. And really, there's not much out there that does that. There's 2 other blockchains that are trying to do that, but we think we've got a better design. We're not getting too much into detail, but what the differences of the blockchain are. But the ideal blockchain in our view is one that combines the gold standards, right? Ethereum, we know, is really good with programmable money and their model. And so do not deviate away from that. Don't try to disrupt that model. Bitcoin is really good to store your value and secure your value as a proposition like gold. And we want to harness those 2 gold standards into one box, one system. That way we have one gold standard that combines both. That's the idea with Syscoin. And I'm not promoting only Syscoin here. I'm saying if I was to create something from scratch, these are the 2 things I would think about, is the gold standards and putting those gold standards to make a new standard of security and utility together. So, there's a trilemma there, right? You either can be really fast, you can be really scalable, you could be really cheap, or you could be really secure. If you try to do all of those, you will fail at one, right? There's always something that starts to degrade. Either it could be super fast and secure, but you won't be cheap, right? And what we're trying to do as an industry is try to offer all 3. There are going to be always trade-offs, but what is the best we could do? Try to increase the speed, scale, make things super cheap, but yet so the average Joes can use this thing and not have to pay an arm and a leg, but yet still be 100% secure. We don't want to give up on the security, right? Security is going to be the core fundamental piece of the puzzle here to solve the world's problems. scale is going to be core to bringing everybody here onto that system, so it's cheap. And speed, you need to be able to do things in real time. Otherwise, if your people are waiting around minutes, what's the point, right? Yeah, I mean, that's with some of the solutions coming out now in the last 2 years, the optimistic rollups and ZK rollups, in a modular blockchain design, using mathematics, we can actually optimize those variables to actually get all three in one system. It's a real big proposition because that problem has not been solved ever before. The mathematicians, the scientists, the computer scientists, all the theoreticians have tried to solve that problem using technology, solving the trilemma, and using database designs, try to make it consistent, make it fast, make it cheap, but they have failed because the mathematical concepts were not there. The financial incentives were not there. When Bitcoin came out, it created a financial incentive to do more than just tinker around and do corporate, a corporate proof of concept. It was a global system, and because of that, there was a lot of money that got poured into it to create incentive to solve these problems. And some of the mathematicians now have solved some of those scalability problems without sacrificing decentralization. That is the real exciting thing that we think is going to transition all blockchains, whether they know it or not, into this new world, and it's going to be way different than what it is today. We don't even know about the use cases that are going to pop up. I would say next 3 to 5 years, the world's going to look vastly different than what it is today, just because of the tech we're talking about right now. Maybe not only Syscoin, but just in general, just the whole industry. Yeah, I mean, we're here to serve the billions, right? We're not here to enrich a few hundred people and just say, hey, hands in the pocket of corporate billionaires and walk away, right? It's about bringing value to the masses and letting people on board, zero barrier of entry. You don't require KYC AML checks to get into the system. You can be in Africa and be in your basement at home, your parents' basement, and create something cool, and all of a sudden it brings value to the world, right? And as a user, I don't want to be encumbered by all of a sudden having to open a bank account just to get involved in the system. I want to be able to put this on my phone or walk around a computer, have no checks, and be able to interact with this system safely. Now, that being said, I don't want to say that compliance isn't a big issue and we need to solve the regulation issue as well. Like, how do we stop terrorists, how do we stop bad actors from coming in the system and totally using this to their advantage? And for example, funding terrorist activities. There are now initiatives that we are also working on that will help solve those problems as well. But we shouldn't take away from the good, right? Just to cover the bad, we shouldn't be giving up the fact that there's this crazy unicorn-based technology that's been created just because we're trying to stop terrorists, right? We gotta be able to think about what the value of all of the good's gonna come and how it's gonna solve the problems, and still try to attack the terrorists, the money laundering, tax evasion, all that stuff. We still need to solve that problem. And so as an industry, we're tackling both things head on right now. And as a regulator, when we spoke to the SEC, their main concern was the counterparty checks. When you do a money transfer today at the bank, you need to know where the money came from. You need to make sure it was safe. You need to make sure it wasn't black, right? And that's a counterparty check. And in the blockchain, since we removed the intermediaries, there's no counterparty checks, right? I'm transferring to you peer-to-peer. And what happens when I transfer to peer-to-peer and you give me something in barter? No one's there to check anything. So how do we get that to governments adopting this tech and saying, sure, you can go and barter all you want. You can do whatever you want to do. We won't check anything. But at the same time, we got to know that it's secure, that it wasn't for an arms deal, right? Or it wasn't to evade tax. We're not hiding this stuff from the government. So, and then I'll flip that on its head and I'll say, why do governments even need to know, right? In the long term, why do governments need to know? There are situations where you want to protect citizens, you want to stop them from doing something bad, but at what cost, right? And so, we can solve those problems, and I see that as a 5 to 10 year solution. After about 5 to 10 years, I think the market's going to really put pressure on the governments to think about these things in a different way, right? They use cash today to do arms deals. What's the difference to using cash, right? It's the same thing as using crypto, and they're tackling that in a different way we need to tackle that with crypto in a different way. I have one slide on compliance, and we'll get into that, but it's a really interesting thing that is relevant right now because the governments, you know, in the US, they're talking about this today. How do we tackle the regulation problem? Because we've created this really cool thing, and it opens zero barriers entry, opens up all these use cases, but now the bad people can come and do whatever they want. So how do we solve that? We'll cover that a little bit. So we talk about the trilemma a little bit, and it's really important to understand when you give up one, when you try to solve two, you give up one. But what we are saying is with some of the breakthroughs we're coming to right now as an industry, we can actually keep all three, and it's a huge claim. And that's solving these three things is what's going to bring and usher a new paradigm of value to the world. You know, I'm talking about redeveloping corporate finance, redeveloping anything to do with money or value or information. When I say information, I'm saying if you have a digital identity, right, you have your phone, your government says this is who you are, and you want to use that in the world, that's going to be your core, your persona, right? Your digital, instead of a physical passport, you'll have a digital passport, and you're going to be able to use that across the ecosystem in a composable way, you know, to do money transfers, to encrypt information to one another, to tell someone I'm over 18 so I can go to the bar and have a drink. You know, all those things, you're going to keep your persona internal to you, but you need the blockchain to kind of secure that information. So when I say value storage and value provenance, I really mean the thing about digital identities unlocking your persona and IoT devices unlocking their persona to use the blockchain in a composable way across finance, across general interactions, and across, you know, government use cases. When governments say they need to tell you who you are just so that you can live in a certain jurisdiction because you're a citizen, you know, that starts with a digital identity given to you by the government, and then you, after 10 years, like I was saying, the government's going to have to invent themselves. Those personal identities are going to be issued by you yourself and most likely social interactions, like Facebook telling you, Twitter telling you, Instagram telling you, and a group of people telling you, yeah, I know that's Justin over there because 15 other people said that's Justin, therefore it must be him. Instead of the government telling you, it'll be your surroundings of people you know, your web of connections telling you you are you. And then from there, you're able to send information to somebody in zero knowledge without giving up your information. If I say I'm over 18, I don't need to tell anyone I'm 40. All you need to know is I'm over 18. And you could do that with some of the crazy breakthroughs that's happening. The same breakthroughs that are happening with scale are applying to information as well. I know it's a little bit technical, but once you understand that the fundamentals there, it really does open your eyes on the prospects of what is coming. Like, you know, the world's about to change. And so this is why I always go back to AI, smart cities, and IoT as the three main things, because those are the fundamental breakthroughs coming up on the application side, right? The AIs, the self-governing computers are coming. They're going to require smart contracts to remove humans from the middleman component, right? To govern themselves. And then IoT, there's embedded devices, there's advertising devices that are going to come, and we need to plug those in to the world of blockchain so that we can remove middlemen when they're advertising to you, or whether they're buying soap for your washing machine automatically, or they're charging your car at a stoplight. And then, you know, IoT and AI and smart cities are all interacting with one another to make our life a lot, follow the same path, same organic path. What blockchain gives you is the ability to have that perpetual growth for the new existing structures that are going to be created. So those corporations that get created that are tokenized, that have tokens on the books, that maybe are based on token models, they will survive long term, much longer than the today's corporations. It all starts with solving these three things. So how do we secure, like, if Syscoin is supposed to be an ideal layer 1 blockchain, how do we solve the security side of things? How do we make this thing as secure as Bitcoin? Well, it turns out Satoshi gave us a really interesting technology before he left, and he called it merge mining. What that means is, if I'm mining on the Bitcoin network, I can actually borrow that same work without creating more pollution and apply it to other blockchains to secure those other blockchains. And those other blockchains, you could do whatever you want. But now they're secured by Bitcoin. So that's called merge mining. It's taking the existing work of Bitcoin, the miners, they're putting those sunk costs, they're spending billions and billions of dollars, and they're hashing, they're using these cool ASICs, they're just number crunching, right? You can take the same algorithms that they're doing and the same work they're doing is also paying them out some money, right, in Syscoin. So now they're getting all this extra revenue using the same work, and they're increasing their revenue at the same time, and they're not doing any extra work. That's what merge mining is, and this means we should be able to attach our existing ideas of let's do smart contracts with Bitcoin by using the Bitcoin security model, and just reusing the work being done by miners, applying it to a new concept. Bitcoin itself can't change, right? Because it is what it is. It's not gonna fork to become something else. It's gonna be what it is. It's a store of value like digital gold. But if you want to do something else, you can introduce a new concept and say, let me do Ethereum smart contracts, but let's secure it with Bitcoin. And it's really interesting to understand that and grasp that idea, because many of these other blockchains, they're starting from scratch and they're saying, let's secure it using this model, let's secure it using that model, but they're not using this concept. This concept actually secures their system in a fundamentally, Satoshi 0 or 1 binary outcome way. It's either fully secure or it's not secure at all. Some of the other consensus systems that people are using to secure, they're gray areas, right? They're using something called proof of stake. If I say I own 1,000 units of value, I have a certain voting percentage of how much I control that network. If I'm a billionaire and I join the system and there's only $2 billion of value in that, I now own 50% of weight of voting in that system. I could decide what that system will do in the future. If I want that system to censor all transactions and I own half of the stake, I can censor all the transactions. There's so many more attack vectors that open up when you switch to those models, but because of political pressure and because of the fact that those systems can scale on the layer 1 much easier, all these blockchains started pushing that way. All the blockchains started saying, no, let's go away from the Bitcoin model, let's go towards a staking model, because you can solve problems much easier. And otherwise we have to reinvent the wheel of Bitcoin. No one wants to do that. And what we're saying is, let's keep that model, right? And let's not scale in the proof of stake way. Let's not scale on layer 1. We don't need to scale on layer 1. Layer 1 is like a court system. It's like you go for a hearing, you hear your court, you hear a fight happens in the court, the judge decides who's right, who's wrong. It doesn't need to be fast. It needs to be secure, and it can't be wrong. That's what a blockchain really is on the layer 1. Instead of trying to say, let's make this layer 1 super duper fast, like some of the other blockchains are trying to do, we are saying, let's make it super slow and secure and get people on the secondary layers to make it super fast there. The problem was, if we thought about that 4 years ago, you couldn't go on the secondary layers without sacrificing security, right? Because as soon as you go on the secondary layers, you're not on the blockchain anymore. You're on something else. So how can you be as secure as being on the layer 1 but being on layer 2? And layer 2 means you're off of the system onto some other system. But in 2020, some white papers came out that's called ZK, zero knowledge proofs, and zero knowledge proof side chains. This allowed us to go to layer 2 using mathematical proofs without sacrificing the security of layer 1. So now we can understand that layer 1 doesn't need to be the transaction processor. It's not your Visa, your MasterCard. It's a court system. And let's use Visa and MasterCard ideas on layer 2 using this new cool math, because we are not sacrificing that trilemma. That's what we're getting at, is saying we can push all of the discrepancies of how do we get fast and cheap and keep security off of those secondary layers. So it's a little bit of a nuance there, but because of that separation, we really created a niche solution there as an ideal blockchain, where our layer 1 is secured by Bitcoin, slow, it's secure, it's stable, and then we plan to secure the scalability side of things on layer 2 using this new magic math we're calling zero knowledge proofs. The math has been around since probably the 70s, but it hasn't been relevant till today because of, again, like I was saying, the financial incentives. When these scientists came around and said, oh, if I solve this problem, this mathematical problem, and let's apply it to blockchain. When you apply those zero knowledge proofs to the blockchain, you get fireworks. You get the ability to scale up financial transactions without sacrificing decentralization. What we call that when we say we have a court system that's a blockchain that's really secure and stable, and then we have a layer 2 that scales up, what we call that is a modular design. Because we're putting different modules together saying, okay, layer 1 is this module, it's your court system. Layer 2 is your transaction processor, it's your Visa, your MasterCard layers where you do quick transactions. It's your IoT layer, it's your smart cities, AI, IBM, Microsoft, these Fortune 500 companies, they'll be on layer 2s, right? That's a modular design because they can all run their own versions of those modules off layer 1. They'll all be secured by the layer 1. It's kind of like a tree. At the top of the tree, you have the secure, or the bottom of the pyramid, you have the secure layer 1, and then all the layers on top are secured by the layer 1, but we covered compliance a little bit, and this is the Ontario Commission here in Canada and in America. The biggest fundamental take, how can we do DeFi, like decentralized finance, which is the new thing that all the kids are doing. You know, they're pressing buttons, they're trading, they're making money, but there's no intermediary in the middle. It's just all through smart contracts. You literally, through a smart contract, you're pressing a button, you're exchanging value, and then you're flipping value in trades and doing arbitrage, all sorts of things, just like a stock market, right? But with no NASDAQ or there's no settlement system in between that's centralized. It's completely open to anybody. And so because of the fact that it's so open and there's so many opportunities, regulatory issues start to come up. Because how do you stop bad people from entering that system? Or do you even want to stop bad people? Maybe you don't. Maybe the value proposition on the pros outweigh the cons, right? But the SEC doesn't want to stop to that. They're saying, no, we need, if we want to have this technology prosper in our country, it's got to be compliant. So there are solutions here, right? There's opt-in solutions. If you're a Fortune 500 company, which we deal with all the time, and the main problem they all have is we don't know what the government's going to tell us. When the government says we cannot join this system, we can't be in blockchain because we are not compliant, we'll get slapped on the wrist by the SEC. They're going to take our business license away. Our business is gone. We can't join the blockchain revolution until we have guidance that we're going to be allowed to participate, right? So all of the big companies, the enterprises, they simply are avoiding to join that race because the governments are telling them there's no guidance yet. So how can we have an opt-in solution where the governments are saying, sure, you use that system, it's fully compliant, and now you can do DeFi on that and bring all your customers and do DeFi on that without any of the custodial risks or any licensing or any sorts of crazy things, right? This is why we want to solve compliance in a way where it's opt-in. It's not forced on you. You know, if you're a person or persons and you want to be covered, you know, under regulatory guidance, you can join in opt-in solutions on the blockchain, you know, using some of the solutions we're coming out with and be totally covered. Right, every angle of compliance is covered for you. This is a 3 to 5 year medium-term solution before we have to rethink the entire wheel of how we even think about value and why we even need compliance in the first place.
You know how people are saying that Trudeau wants to stop all this? Is that kind of like, when is that? Like down the road? Like how he wants to, people are saying he wants to stop all this digital currency.
So the question is, the governments are saying they want to, Trudeau they want to stop digital currency in their tracks before it takes away. Well, I mean, the thing is, it's zero barrier of entry, and remember, if you create the layer 1 as secure as possible, and remember the two attacks that are important are hackers and state-driven attacks. So I'm sure the countries have tried to stop Bitcoin, right? There's been trials where, okay, well, how much money do we need to put in to try to stop this thing in its tracks? If you make it secure enough and offer the economies of scale and offer the perpetual security as it grows, as more people get in, they have more incentive to get in, more computing power gets in, and it becomes super secure from those state-driven attacks, they really have no option. There's no option. People can join on their own will, and all they can really do is say, we'll slap you on the wrist if you're caught using this technology.
We'll still figure out a way.
Well, this is why we want opt-in regulation, right? Because if they really are scared and they're saying we will go in jail if we are using this technology for whatever reason, we're going to be slapped on the wrist, then I can get myself covered by using a system that they're okay with. Until we have to revisit that compliance system again. Down the road. Yeah. So today the governments, in the US and Canada at least, they've stopped themselves from completely trying to throw everyone under the bus who use, we're going to tax you to death, we're going to throw you in jail. They've stopped that because it's stifling innovation, right? There's more innovation. The pros will outweigh the cons. There's a lot more innovation happening. If they stop this, they're going to lose jobs. There's going to be something I call jurisdictional arbitrage, where people that value this technology so much and it's so big, they'll just move to different jurisdictions that are open to them. Come on in. We'll let you build your apps here, do all your blockchain stuff here, and we'll actually promote it. We'll give you grants. So this is why the US in 2016, 2017 decided, okay, we're not going to completely try to outlaw this thing. We have to understand it, and we have to provide frameworks around it. So two kind of tracks, right? One is completely anarchist, let anyone build anything, good and bad is not a thing, everyone is equal. The other side is, okay, well, governments need some sort of, they want to protect people from being bad people or doing bad things. So those two worlds are kind of separate. We're working to kind of merge them together for the short to medium term. Long term, we have to revisit that. We have to have that discussion to see what it even means to be compliant, and are there other ways to stop terrorists in their tracks? This is a little bit technical, but basically when you have a smart contract platform where you can do DeFi and you can do a whole bunch of things, and there's zero barrier of entry, there's a lot of attack vectors that start to pop up. Like in Ethereum, there's billions of dollars being traded in the decentralized finance space, right? Every day, maybe every hour sometimes, right? And because of that, there's a lot of opportunities to extract value. There's a lot of opportunities to tell, right now there's miners, right? They tell the miners, please switch the blocks up for me, I'll pay you $1 million, but we'll share a bounty of $10 million. So why not? The miner's gonna say, I'll make $9 million out of this if I could just switch the blockchain to some other view, just for a short term. It's gonna cost me $1 million, but I'll make $9 million. Every other person in the whole system suffers because the whole system got switched on them, right? It's all about every minute or every second there's a block that gets formed, and everyone has to believe that block is their value, and the transaction settled, the next transaction is settled in the subsequent blocks, meaning if I do a banking transaction and the bank tells me yes, it's confirmed, I don't want to have to look back tomorrow and say, it wasn't confirmed, by the way, your money went back to the original person. You don't have that money in your bank account. So a miner can actually ultimately do that if he wants. He can say, let me roll back. It's going to cost me a lot of money, but I'll make more money because there's a bribe on the table, right? How do you solve that problem? It doesn't really pertain to Bitcoin so much, because Bitcoin doesn't have DeFi. It doesn't have all of this crazy decentralized finance stuff happening where you can arbitrage value and create these collusion scenarios. Bitcoin is just straight, let me give you money, receive money, and that's it. There's no opportunity to create these minor extractable value things that we're talking about. But in Ethereum there is. And it's one of the reasons Ethereum is switching models to proof of stake, is to create something called finality, right? And finality means that once every state is transitioned in the blocks, after some time, it cannot be rolled back. So why didn't Bitcoin do this, right? Why didn't Bitcoin design it in a way where you cannot roll back after a block? Well, there's a simple reason. It's because in distributed systems, everyone's working in parallel, and there's all sorts of discrepancies around the world. For example, the Great Firewall of China is a few minutes behind the rest of the world. So if you're a miner in China creating a block, and if you're a miner in Canada or America creating a block, there might be a discrepancy of how long it takes for someone in Africa to see your information. Because there's that discrepancy, you can never agree what the true state is until you hear at least one round of communication between everybody, right? So therefore, you're going to have all sorts of competing, we call chains, competing information. Which one of these informations is right? And Bitcoin solves this by saying, whoever has the longest standing value of information, a chain of information or blocks, is the right one, and I'm going to use that one and discard everyone else. So if you're in China and you're super slow and you're building slower than everybody else and using less energy than everybody else, your value, whatever you say the blockchain is as a miner, is not going to apply. It's going to be the guys who are faster, who are applying more work, who are putting more money on the line, and putting this value in the blockchain, creating a longer series of value or chains. So finality is simply not possible in that environment, because if you have multiple competing chains or value statements, what do you lock? How do you lock it? Because at any point in time, you could be the longest chain and someone else should be able to come along and say, nope, that guy's not the longest chain. I put more value in. I was slow before, but I'm faster now. Therefore, my value is the truth. My blocks are the truth. So Bitcoin doesn't need to solve it. They don't need to solve it because they, in a very nuanced, subtle way, an innovative way, that this value is the correct one over time because I put the most money and the most energy on this chain of events. In Ethereum, they're switching to say, let's forget the idea of competing informations. Let's spend a little bit of time to hear what you have to say, what you have to say, what you have to say about what the state of the system is, and there's no opportunity to go back and say, let's redo that. The state is going to become final. And what we did with Syscoin is we said, let's use the Bitcoin model, right? But let's innovate on top of that to say after some time, we'll lock that in, right? It's good enough for us that we see what the chain of events here, but let's lock that in and it can't roll back. And if you can't roll back, you don't have these auction bribery systems happening, these minor extractable values, right? If someone wants to bribe someone, they only have a limited amount of time before they can say, let's roll back that system. It can't roll back anymore. You can't roll back, the bribery system kind of dies off. So when we talk about chain locks, it's a mechanism to lock the blockchain using and when we lock the system, it makes the smart contract mechanism or the DeFi mechanism more valuable long term. Because you don't have that attack vector where someone's going to roll back your chain. And for the YouTube listeners, sorry I have to dumb it down, but we have some new people that need to learn about the basics. But I hope I'm covering these concepts in a way that makes sense to everybody. So we have a lot of these people that Syscoin, and then they run a special node, and they're participating in this mechanism of locking the chain. So imagine all of us here had a bunch of Syscoin. Let's say for the sake of it, we had one Syscoin each, right? And we could become a special node where we're voting on what the system looks like at any given time, right? What we call a master node is a special node that has special privileges to say to the world that, hey, I saw a blockchain and at this given time, this was the state. And everyone agrees. Once everyone agrees, then we lock that blockchain in. Because we all heard about it the same way. But if half the room says, no, I saw something from China and China says it's this. I saw something from America, and America says something this. We don't agree. It doesn't get locked, right? We can't lock it until everyone agrees. But once everyone agrees, lock that in. Let's go to the next state, and have this. So this is an innovation we did on top to say let's figure out a way to lock the blockchain using these special masternodes, we'll call them. You cannot double send it from your account, right? Double spending would mean I send coffee and then I turn around and send $5 to myself somewhere else. You just doubled your $5, right? That's double spending. And the blockchain prevents double spending by having the miners agree on the state and saying, nope, you sent $5, it's gone, you cannot get the $5 back. When you have zero-knowledge proofs can actually solve that problem by saying, I'm going to check the state of the blockchain and I'll tell you that you've done a spend of $5 and you have not double spent it. It's locking it in within math. And you're checking it against the blockchain state. So that in itself is pretty cool, right? It creates privacy, it solves problems, you're moving it off chain. But it's even cooler because you can take all those transactions and you can batch them up. You can aggregate them up. So everyone in the room here, we're doing a transaction, and we're pressing it on our phone, we're buying coffee at the same time, and multiply that by 1 million, a million people are buying coffee at the same time. Traditionally, you'd have to go and do a database entry or a blockchain transaction, right? With zero-knowledge proofs, you can create one proof, you can send it to one server, one proof that represents all million transactions at once, and a small proof of a few kilobytes. And the blockchain will check that proof only. It doesn't need to know all the transactions. It simply checks the proof. You can see how much it's going to scale everything, right? And the proof cannot lie. The proof you mathematically proven that you cannot double spend. Because of that, proof cannot be false. Like I was saying, Satoshi's 1 or 0 idiom. 1 meaning it's valid, 0 meaning it's not. 1 meaning it's valuable, 0 meaning it's not valuable. We apply the same concept here. In a zero-knowledge proof, it's either fully valid or not fully valid. It's not valid. You can't trust it. When the smart contract on the blockchain checks for it, it checks to see if it's valid. And if the statement is correct, it's checking for double spends. It's checking for double spends for a whole bunch of transactions. If it's valid, it's going to say, yep, I'm good. All those transactions are valid. I don't even know how many transactions are in there. I just know that it's valid. This is why how we're able to scale. Traditionally, blockchains like Solana, for example, they touted 50,000 transactions a second, right? They did a lot of cool things we all got to process that, aggregate all those transactions. We see after 500 TPS starts to slow down in reality, like their blockchain dropped recently. It was doing about 500 to 1,000 TPS realistically, and it bogged down. We can realistically start scaling up much, much more because we are not touching the layer 1 blockchain. Everything, which means you're getting true parallelization. Everyone's computing in batch. So a lot of tech, but at face value, you can get much higher scalability. 10x more than Visa, MasterCard today, right? So imagine bumping up what Visa, MasterCard to do, but generally with any type of smart contract system, value in any way. So not just sending money to you, but doing any sort of smart contract interaction. It opens up a lot of doors. As soon as you can scale, you can push fees down. Your fees are nothing, and maybe business covers your fees. So it's just eye-popping what the new use cases are. And this is why I'm saying in the next 5 years, 3 to 5 years, the world as we change. And we can kind of see that the political world is changing in front of our eyes, and maybe it's because all the money is getting reallocated into the blockchain because people see this, smart money sees this. There's a real flood of And because of that, there's speculation on innovation and all the money's being poured into it. This average Joes, they don't see it yet because it's not in front of their eyes. Scalability is going to get us there, so average Joes can participate and value that's going to come out of this. So as us, like Syscoin, we've been around since a long time, right? We've been around since 2014. We've kind of seen it all. We've been through ups and downs, but we've been researching and developing the whole time. We try to figure out how do we keep the Bitcoin model and start to scale through smart contracts and start to do this in a very secure way. What do we have to wait for before we go mainstream? We always knew that zero knowledge proofs was going to be the key to success, but we didn't know how until around 2020. We can scale this blockchain stuff with ZK, it became really interesting for us. So we kind of were laying in the weeds. We were kind of like Sun Tzu style, we're waiting and waiting. We're trying to see what other people are doing. We're focusing on the Bitcoin model and security and all that stuff. And then when ZK came, let's go, we're ready now. We know our path to get to mainstream. We know our path to get to mainstream in a proper way that doesn't conflict with the ideologies of Bitcoin and how Bitcoin scales in terms of security. It scales security in a really nice way, right? The more people in Bitcoin, the more secure it becomes, the more valuable it becomes. That same economies of scale is being applied to transactionality in the blockchain as well. We do have a public company that's been around since 2016 as well, and that's called Blockchain Foundry. It's a public company. It's listed on the CSE. It's traded on Frankfurt as well, and I'm the CTO of that blockchain company. So we have to deal with enterprises all the time. And we have to take away what they're saying. Enterprises are saying we need this and this available. It needs to be private. These are sorts of things we've taken away from the enterprise market, the banks, these problems. And Blockchain Foundry, we've done a lot of the research and development of Syscoin. We've also had our own product ideas, how we can make money on top of the blockchain stack as well. We are a growing ecosystem, but all of the blockchains look like this, right? They have a bunch of projects, all the projects start to gain value, and this one is way more populated. This is 2 months old, way more populated than it was, but it's about to explode. As soon as we get ZK going, we have these roll-up systems where you can be scalable. These boxes are going to explode, right? Because now everyone can deploy, fees are not an issue, security is not an issue anymore, we get economies of scale, we can do anything, no barrier of entry, anyone can build anything. There's a Ciscoin Foundation that is, we are ushering in all of these people into our block. We don't want to be thinking of it as a company. It's supposed to be more like a non-profit, more like a awareness organization where we push the blockchain concept to people. But how do you scale that up? How do you hire employees? How do you keep that going perpetually? How do you build value? We actually are doing some innovation on a non-profit foundation scaling perpetually over time. And that's something we're going to be talking about in the near future. But this sort of thing is going to explode once we can have the scalability metrics on the blockchain. As of today, where we are at right now is we have the layer 1 blockchain, which is secure and stable. The blocks are where all of the fun will be, all the transactions, all the IoT, smart cities, AI, DeFi, metaverse, GameFi, all those things will be on those layers in a secure way. So because of that, once Ethereum merges to proof of stake and has these roll-ups going on it, the fees on Ethereum are going to drop, right? They're going to be zero pretty much. They have some scalability proposals coming in that's going to push it down even more. It's going to be 100x less fees. Why do you need another smart chain? Why do you need another blockchain? And through our soul searching, we found there definitely is a need for another blockchain that is as secure as the gold standard of Bitcoin, right? We are not willing to sacrifice the security of the Bitcoin model while trying to get the Ethereum flexibility. And Ethereum is saying, let's reinvent the security model and let's try to do something new to scale up. And we don't need proof of work. it's environmentally unfriendly. Let's do proof of stake. Maybe it's more secure. But the jury is out on if it's actually secure or not, because it's a gray area, right? It's a gray spectrum of attack vectors that start to open up. Maybe in 5-10 years, the Ethereum model is known as secure. The academics come back and say, yep, it's bulletproof. This is it. This is what we transition to. And the Bitcoin model phases out. But as it stands today, the Bitcoin model is gold standard for security, and the Ethereum model is gold standard for the modular blockchain model on Ethereum is gold standard for scaling and flexibility and utility. And what we are doing is putting those together. In the world where Ethereum fees are not an issue and scale is not an issue, there's going to be an influx of demand back to Ethereum from all these other chains like Solana, Avalanche, ADA that say no, we are faster and cheaper than Ethereum. Those claims go away. What happens? The value goes back. It will transition right back to Ethereum. Why would you need another chain on top of that? Where's your niche market? Well, for us, it's the security side of things. It's saying we'll secure your value in a better way and still provide you all of the scalability and flexibility of what Ethereum is doing. So this, again, a couple of months old, but it's more of an investor deck, right? But you can see the valuations are pretty crazy, right? These blockchains are not providing that much value, right? You guys have never transacted on this blockchain before, right? If you ask 100 people, maybe one person is probably just holding these coins. There's not much happening, but why are they worth so much? It's because there's a speculation that all of this stuff is going to change our lives in the next 5 years, and we got to get one horse in the race where it might be a blockchain that's relevant, and therefore it's going to be worth way more than it is today. In my view, there's 4 stacks of value in the world, in the financial world. There's going to be the layer 1 blockchain, which is the root of all value in the world. It's going to be where all of the value of all the decentralized applications, all the tokens, all the new financial models, all the companies that get built on top, that's the layer 1 blockchain, right? It has a token on there, the cryptocurrency that drives the security. It needs a token. So layer 1 blockchain is the top of the stack. Then you have the mining market. Like Bitmain is worth $60 billion or $70 billion. And there's just they create the miners, right? And the mining market secures the blockchains. There's also going to be the ZK miners that are going to come out. There's 3 companies I know of that are starting the zero knowledge proof, the system of saying to scale up. It also requires special chips in the future. GPUs, FPGAs, ASICs. That's a new mining market starting up. It's very lucrative. The mining market is second layer of value, right? Because if I get into that market and I start mining the system, I create revenue, those tokens blow up, the layer 1 tokens blow up, my valuations also blow up, right? The third layer is going to be your application layer. Like you have your distributed app. Like all of the DeFi products on there, on blockchains today, on the Ethereum today, those are dApps, right? A lot of them are worth billions of dollars. And the fourth layer is your token, like your token that you're just earning your passive income on. So on the fourth layer, it's the easiest to get right? It's easiest to make money, but you're not going to make as much money. You won't make your 10x, 100x multiples. Even though you're so early to the race, you won't make your multiples. That third layer, they're dApps, you'll make a little bit more money, but you're also it's more risk. The second layer, more risk. The first layer, if you get it wrong, you lose everything, right? If you don't have a horse in the race that's relevant long term, that's going to be relevant as a blockchain layer 1 long term. It's the most risk, but it's also the most reward. So those are the 4 value stacks I see in the future, and the ones that are relevant long term are going to be valued accordingly. This is why the valuations are through the roof. If we hit a $5 billion market cap, again, remember, this is an investor deck. We're not saying these numbers are going to be, this is not forecasting anything, but should we hit $5 billion market cap, each of those master nodes, the seniority will be $4,000 a month, passive income in your pocket every month, right? And that's a growth of about 8x, 8 times X. If you own one master node, you'll be generating, just the seniority alone will generate you $4,000 a month, passive income. It's like a job. It's earning you money over time. And you could put that money wherever you want. You could put it back into the ecosystem or just cash out and do whatever you want. So we've been outperforming some of these other chains growth-wise, but again, that's a little bit old. We've dipped a little bit. We're coming back up, and in general, all of these blockchains are all growing, right? Everyone's speculating that this is the future of finance, and so all the smart money is starting to and the valuation is just really crazy. But what is the true valuation? We won't know until we can get the scalability up there. Because once you get the scalability up there, everyone here can start building on it. When you have everyone here building on it, then it hits the average person and the GDP of your whole country starts to go up. When your GDP goes up, you're bringing real value. You're creating real value that affects lives. It's like creating the internet, right? You created real value for people to transact information around the world. So we are so excited because this is a path for us to revolutionize the world. We've combined best of both models. We are not reinventing wheels, but we are reinventing the spots that need to be reinvented. But we're keeping the model of Bitcoin for security. We're keeping the model of Ethereum for flexibility. We're putting those models together. We're creating a new standard, and that standard's called Syscoin. And we're trying to usher in a secure, safe way for us to go to the new IoT, smart city, AIs, decentralized finance systems of the world. Incidentally, that's what we're calling Web3, right? Web3 is the new way to transact value from person to person or thing to thing or person to thing without intermediaries. Web2 was kind of like scaling up the initial internet with a back-end system telling you, hey, here's the database, it's telling me there's certain value, update your website, right? Immersive website apps on your phone are Web 2. Web 3 says there's no one in the middle telling you what that value is. The blockchain is in the middle, and the blockchain is an abstract concept that anyone can enter at any given time. It opens up a new world of possibilities because anyone can do anything they want and no one can stop them. You can build value, you can transact value, and there's no cuts in the middle, right? It's the most efficient path towards creating value, making money transfers, doing DeFi, any type of application on the blockchain related to value or money. Cutting out middlemen is what Web3 really is all about. So that's the presentation, right? And we'll transition to questions. So I'm going to switch over to YouTube and see what questions there are. And we'll go over the questions, maybe if there's some really interesting ones. And then we'll basically end it off there if you have questions here. For anyone here, we're going to be sending, if you guys have either a Binance account or if you could download the Clever wallet, which you can Google in the App Store and add Syscoin, I could just send you some Syscoin after the AMA. And later on, if you guys want to keep that or cash out or go to Binance and sell that or whatever you want, it's up to you guys. And on the AMA online, if you guys have good questions and we select 10 of those good questions, we'll be sending you guys some Syscoin as well. And this is, we're going to be growing these AMAs over time, so we'll be having other people participate as well. So this is kind of the start of our AMA adventures. And yeah, we'll be giving away Sys at these events to help foster people to learn about it, become ambassadors, get in the system. This is how we all got in, right? We put a little bit of energy in, put a little bit of development effort in or money in, and we started learning about it. And for me, it was a black hole, right? I fell in because I was a software developer. Philosophically, I was aligned with the concepts of the monetary angle of Bitcoin, and it became a black hole, and now we're way past that, and we're on to DeFi and smart contracts. Very cool. I hope all of you guys fall into that black hole as well, because it really does open up a lot of eyes and opportunity once you see what's being done. So there is People just want their sys. Where's my sys? And guys, you're free to come in here and leave your questions, and we'll be answering some of them. And again, we'll be giving away sys. So come. There's no dumb questions, right? So come in and ask away, and we'll try to do our best. These messages are getting deleted over time, or?
No, they shouldn't be. You can scroll up.
Yeah, I mean, it stops right here. It doesn't let me scroll up anymore. Okay, so this is a good question by Jorn. When Syscoin gets heavy use, does it have a mechanism to clean up the chain like Ethereum is so big right now? If you have an AWS server and you want to load up Ethereum on it, you try to do that today. It'll take you weeks and weeks and weeks to sync up because there's so much data. Because everything is happening on one layer. All the transactions that ever happened, like think about a banking infrastructure where you have to sync up to all the transfers around the world. It takes weeks and weeks because there's so much data, right? So the question is, does Syscoin have something that is preventing that heavy use? When Syscoin becomes mainstream, what's stopping it from having that same problem? Like, I don't want to sync up. It's not really decentralized if only a few people can sync up to the system, right? And keep it secure. It's only valuable if people with average computers can run this system and verify that it's 100% correct. If you can't verify it, just use the database. You just trust the company that tells you that, right? There's no value in that. And Ethereum today is way too bloated. This is why they're moving to a modular system where they're moving off of storing that stuff on layer 1. The fundamental answer to that is in the modular design, right? We're not changing the way Ethereum works today, but we are changing the way people use the system. We're saying let's not store all of the transactions on layer 1. You could if you want. It's going to cost you more, but it's going to be a lot cheaper if you're on layer 2. And by the way, there's nothing wrong with using layer 2. You're just as secure. You can settle your value on layer 2 and 100 years down the road, come back and take your value back to layer 1 if you want. The money is always going to be there. How are we solving that problem? By transitioning all of the state and value to layer 2. And layer 2 is where the state starts getting added up. And there's going to be many layer 2s all at once, right? We'll have one layer 2 for one use case, another layer 2 for another use case, government layer 2s for custodial, compliant use cases, and all of them have their own concerns, but they don't need all of these nodes syncing up to it. It could be a handful of nodes, it could be maybe a couple of thousand nodes. It doesn't have the same concerns as Ethereum does today. So those systems, they're offloading a lot of the bloat from layer 1. And that's how we're solving the problem of the bloat. Another question from Joseph Lee asked, what was the team's plan to improve adoptability? How do we gain traction, right? How do we get people to learn about it and build on it? There's so many options out there. There's like 15 different blockchains that are really popular today. Why would someone choose yours? Like, what's the point of another one? Just use what's existing. Well, through the presentation, we outline why it's important to have an ideal blockchain, right? Why it's important to have security and utility in the same place. And if you don't have that, we're beating ourselves up to try to actually create innovation for the sake of innovation. There's nothing there of value long term. In our view, the Bitcoin model, Ethereum model is important. And how do we get people to use that? Well, we do have incentive models in place. We have grants in place. We have a $20 million TVL incentive, right? So if you're a protocol in the Ethereum space and you launch on Syscoin, we have a lot of money to give away. We have grants, right? If you have a really cool idea, you can get a grant from the foundation to build on top, right? We're doing a concept with screens, and we're building it with Sys. Get a grant, right? If it's a strong enough use case, we're there to give grants. So this is generally how many of these blockchains start scaling up. Going to conferences, giving away Sys, applying grants and TVL incentives, and starting to hit the marketing button online to get the word out. Once you have the tech and it scales, the only way to get adoption is to get the developers on board and building, and the projects on board and building, and then the users can come and start using it to make money. Oh, message? Oh, okay, yep. What is the position of Syscoin and being green? Have you heard about Bitcoin and the fact that it's environmentally, people are saying it's a lot of pollution and carbon intensive, right? I mean, it does incentivize green research, but the fact is, Bitcoin as it stands today is taking up 3 to 5% of the world's energy expenditure. That's a lot, right? It's like as much as a large country. And that is only going to get worse. What are we doing about that with Syscoin? Are we doing anything about that? So the answer there is merge mining. Remember we covered the concept of merge mining? We are not actually using more energy by securing our network. We're saying let's just keep the energy expenditure as it is and secure our blockchain through merge mining by not doing any more energy expenditure. And what that allows for someone to see is if someone else created a blockchain and they saw Syscoin's model and it became successful, they will copy that model and say, well, I got security for Bitcoin, might as well do merge mining with my system too. And now Bitcoin becomes kind of like the pillar of all the security around the world, where multiple systems being secured by it. It's providing much more value than Bitcoin itself. It's providing value in Syscoin and Namecoin, all these other blockchains being created and secured by that blockchain. So when people say how much value is it providing, if it's using 3 to 5% of the world's energy, what value is it providing? Is it just Bitcoin? No, it's more than just Bitcoin, because all of these other chains are also being secured by it. So it opens up an exponential growth curve on the value and covers the fact that it's so much energy to secure the system. So what we're doing about it is naturally we're incentivized to do green initiatives and create green initiatives and carbon offsets and this sort of thing. But overall, we're not contributing to any more carbon footprint because of merge mining. Good questions, yeah. Okay. Are there any active Dows working? DAO is a really interesting concept. It's called decentralized or distributed autonomous organization. Think of it as a company that's driven by smart contracts. It's hard to think about, but think about a company that has a balance, like a treasury, and people are voting on that treasury, how it should be used, and then the board decides, okay, well, if everyone agrees that I should put money into going to buy gold, for example, then that's what I have to do. Because I'm elected as a board official and everyone's voting. Just like in a company, you vote for it, right? But you can do that through smart contracts. So the smart contracts can enforce the decisions. So if everyone says, let's go buy gold because I have $5 billion of treasury, the distributed autonomous organization is a smart contract, and it can automatically enforce the purchase of gold on the DeFi market because everyone agreed on it. So it's a really interesting concept, right? And some people say the voting may not be so good, but that's where the idea was born, was to have some sort of treasury, some sort of autonomous organization on top, and some sort of voting infrastructure so people can allocate resources and build real companies instead of having physical companies on the stock market or private market today. You have a smart contract-driven company which is governing itself. And like I was saying, there's no organic growth curve now which doesn't live and breathe and die after 100 years, it's dynamic. It will switch, it will pivot however people want it to pivot to. So if the people in that DAO decide tomorrow, let's switch our business model and let's do something else. If they all vote on it, that's what happens. There's no central person to say, no, I don't want to do that. That's not a good idea. It's not going to make money. It's a collective agreeing that it's a good idea. Therefore, let's do that. So there were a couple of DAOs being built on Sys. One was a gold-backed DAO, and I think it's still under development, but that the whole DAO model started to break down because of the Olympus DAO, which recently has been under fire. And there's been innovations on the DAO side to create real DAO value. We can disrupt corporate finance, and that's some of the stuff we're working on today. All I'm going to say there is we are innovating in that space. Like, I think DAOs are really important to our future, to a future of a new way of creating company and corporate finance. So imagine in 10 years, we don't have a notion of a company anymore. We don't even know what a company, like the kids from those days, they won't even know what a company is. Everything's DAOs. Everything is a DAO. That's the strength of what's possible here. First, you need to create scalable blockchain. It needs to be secure. We're laying the railroad tracks of everything that's coming on top. DAOs is layer 3. We're talking about, remember the 4 layers? The DApp layer, it's layer 3. It's an important layer 3 concept, but it's layer 3. We first need to lay out layer 1, layer 2, and then layer 3 comes right after that. You guys have any questions so far? One more, okay. More of a technical question from the community, someone who's more plugged in. Remember we mentioned we scale through ZK, zero knowledge proofs. There's one particular project out there that's the first to market to allow us to do smart contracts with ZK in the most efficient way. It actually, like if you're on Ethereum today and you're programming in that language, you'll be able to take that and port it over to the ZK language, which is a mathematical language. And we can actually run those smart contracts in this new way of doing things. And that means all of the smart contracts in Ethereum today can just simply transition over without major headaches. What that project is called is ZK Sync, right? ZK Sync 2, which is, there was a 1.0 and now there's a 2.0, is going to be the foundational moment of our industry for this year. As soon as they launch, that means that Ethereum and Syscoin will be able to scale more than any of the blockchains today in a secure way. We don't sacrifice any decentralization, but we have a roadmap towards scaling to thousands of thousands or hundreds of thousands of transactions. Like I was saying, we're laying the road right now. That will be the pinnacle moment when the road gets paved and we build on top. So that moment when ZK Sync 2, it's in public testing phase right now. When they launch, it'll be the biggest event of this year, and we are plugged into that as well. We're talking to that team. We're going to take their tech onto Syscoin, layer it into our unique proposition of Syscoin with some other solutions we have related to data availability for some of the guys on YouTube, but we're going to take that and pave the way on Syscoin in the same way it's paving on Ethereum. I would say Syscoin and Ethereum are kind of the two that are following very tightly coupled paths together. So if you're very bullish on Ethereum, on the path, how it's scaling up, you would be bullish on Syscoin and on the path of scaling up as well. There's no more questions on there. There's one more? Okay. No, I'm not too concerned about the prohibition because I think fundamentally the people there, their prohibition against proof of work. I don't know if you guys heard about the UK bill that's trying to get passed. It got rejected on trying to ban proof of work, which is the model behind Bitcoin. I mean, they could try all they want, but there's always going to be a market for mining Bitcoin because there's natural economic incentives you can collect. And so if everyone is banned in their countries like China, there's always going to be a jurisdiction that says, please come to us. Just use energy here, use hydro, use anything here, and we'll bring you on board, and all of the value, all the innovation will come that way. It's the same, trying to ban proof of work is the same argument as trying to ban Bitcoin. In 2017, when the legislation in the US met and talked with some of the people in the industry, they decided not to ban Bitcoin because they were pro-innovation. It brings up so many cool things and so many use cases. They didn't ban it because of all the possible lost jobs that can come. Same thing, right? They won't ban proof of work because it'll stifle innovation. And it'll stifle all this innovation that they don't even know is possible yet. So some of the people in the UK are just really scared about it. They're saying, what happens when it takes over is more than 5%, it's 10%, 15%. But what about all the innovation we're about to get? What about all these cool new use cases? Like I just laid the foundation for IoT, smart cities, and AI. Without blockchain, it's not possible in a scalable way. With blockchain, it becomes self-sovereign, right? I store my own identities. There's no theft of my own information. I can transact with my own value. There's no theft of my own value. I can hold my own wallet and do whatever I want, and no one's there to take it away. It's the most efficient path forward. If you ban proof of work, you'll be banning all of the innovation that comes on top. So I don't think they'll be banning it globally. There may be some jurisdictions that try it, and they'll probably roll it back. But if they try it, all the innovation will move away from that jurisdiction. So that's good. Okay, so let's open up questions here, and hey guys, thanks for the questions on YouTube. Those are really good questions, great questions, and we'll be collecting your Syscoin addresses, and we'll send those over to you after the AMA. Awesome, really some tuned in people, and they definitely know their stuff. Any questions here? Anything if you're thinking about. Yeah.
How can we apply that in real life? For example, you're saying with the age verification. Say you start a gambling website or something like that. How would you apply that to an everyday user?
Yeah, so the question was, ZK, how can you apply it to real life? Anytime you have an exchange of information, any exchange of information, you could apply ZK to that. And what that does is it allows you to remove the data silos. Like, for example, if an intermediary is storing that information, saying, oh, I know habits of this person, and I can sell that habit to you, right? And if you want to remove that attack vector, because sometimes those habits, you can monetize them, right? Sometimes you don't want them to be monetized because there's GDPR rules and all these other sorts of things, right? As soon as you have information on users, there's GDPR you got to think about, and then there's all sorts of laws you got to comply to based on jurisdiction. If you don't want to have to apply to those laws because of GDPR and protection of data rights, then you want to remove those attack vectors. You want to remove the ability for someone to have a book on you. Those books are going to form regardless, but the farther up the stack you push, the less likely you'll have to have these incumbent licenses you have to sign up state by state or country by country. So on one angle, the users will care. It's not, the companies, they want the book on you, right? They'll make money. But the users, and I took part of a few censuses, and they're, in the UK especially, it's becoming widely known that people want to store their own information, and they want to be monetized if they're giving up that information. Data markets. Data markets as in, if I want to give up my information, my habits to you, I want to be paid for that. And in order to give up information, you can use ZK. Because any other way you're giving up information, you're going to end up openly transmitting that information to somebody, and then they have a book on you. But if I just want to know that you're over 18, or I love gambling, or I don't love gambling, you can send that information without exposing more about yourself. So anytime there's an exchange of value or information, ZK is like the mathematical black box that secures both sides from learning more than they should be learning about each other. It doesn't only apply to blockchain, it opens up for information as well. It's a really, really interesting breakthrough, and it's been around for a long time, but no one really cared about it because there was no financial incentives involved. It's like the academics came out with the solution, but where do I apply this? Without blockchain, you cannot root your digital identity, you have your digital identity rooted to the government or something. It's not that powerful. It's more powerful if I control my own data, and then no one in the world has a book on me. No one knows who I am. It's pseudo-anonymous. I can tell you who I am, but you have to pay me. And if the government knows who I am, maybe that's not as powerful, right? So that's why the academics thought, no real use case here. But once you marry it with the blockchain, the use cases start becoming real. Any?
Pretty straightforward, yeah.
Yeah. Hopefully I explained it easy. Yeah.
I'm just playing with the finance.
Yeah. Get the address and we'll send you.
I'm just like learning more stuff.
Oh yeah. Willie, you have any questions? One, drill me. He's going to be on a panel in Dubai and he's going to ask these hard questions. Beginners? When I was beginning, it was a black hole on the philosophy of money because I really questioned the viability of Bitcoin because it was deflationary. It's like the consumer electronics market, right? Why would I wait to buy the TV when it's become cheaper in the next year? But you still end up buying the TV because you want to use it today, even though it's going to be cheaper tomorrow. For me, I was like, it was hard for me to crack that nut. It was like, it's a deflationary market with Bitcoin. It's like, where are the lending markets going to come from? If I know I hold my Bitcoin, it's going to be worth more tomorrow, why would I lend that out to you? I'll just hold the Bitcoin. And the hyper-Bitcoinization effect takes hold, where no one's lending anything. There's a credit crunch. No one can borrow anything. All the companies are just hoarding. And definitely, if you ask Michael Saylor, that's what's going to happen. Everyone's just going to be hoarding and hoarding and hoarding until we get to a point where everyone's going to be working with Satoshis, with Bitcoin. And it's like, if you want any information on me, give me Satoshis. If you want to work for me, give me Satoshis. But credit markets will work totally different. It was a real hard pill to swallow when I started learning about it. But if you think about the consumer market, that's how I thought about it. The consumer market, you would still end up spending. Even if it's cheaper tomorrow, you still end up spending. In the Bitcoin market, you only spend when you have to. In the Ethereum market, is it a little bit different? Because the Ethereum market, it's not the same thing, right? It's not perpetual growth and hopefully Ethereum keeps going up in price. It's different. Ethereum's inflation is modeled differently. Syscoin's inflation is modeled differently. Can it be a little bit different than the Bitcoin effect, right? And what we looked at there was what happens in 50 years when our kids grow up and there's 7 billion people in the world today. What happens when there's 11 billion people in the world? Are those 4 or 5 billion people going to be priced out of the market when the price of Ethereum and Syscoin are 10 million bucks each, or whatever the price of Bitcoin is? It's just way more. What's the point if they're priced out? If we're just creating value for our generation and then we die and it's like you're pricing everybody out after you, is there real value there? I mean, on Bitcoin, they don't care. It's about gold, right? And gold is a first come, first serve. There's only so much scarce resource. They don't care about smart contracts, right? In Ethereum, you care about utility. And in Syscoin, we care about utility. We want people to use this every day, to do DeFi, to be able to barter, to buy coffee, to get into decentralized finance, to start my car, to borrow a car, to borrow someone's rental home for the weekend and pay them a little bit of money. Once I pay them money, the door unlocks automatically. It locks after the money, after my residual income ends to pay that, it locks automatically. These sorts of things, 50 years down the road, it's still got to be usable. And so what we did with Syscoin, and Ethereum kind of did this, but we modeled our inflation off of population growth. So if population growth is growing 1% per year, we start with a baseline of inflating 1% per year, with the idea that we're not going to inflate down to zero. We're always going to have some sort of inflation, but the inflation will go along with population. So as more and more people come into the world, hopefully they won't be priced out because there'll be more coins at that time, more supply. As there's more supply, it affects the price, right? But if there is a huge amount of utility, the price will be going up because there's more demand, but it'll be coupled with the inflation that's modeled off of population. It's a very philosophical, economic-based solution, but we thinking about down the road, I'm not designing for our life. I'm designing for the next generations, because this is who we got to think about. Because we pretty much, we're going to live in the situation we're living in today. Next 10, 15 years, it'll be different, but it's not going to be, we may still have the US dollar as our global store of currency around the world, but in our future generations, it's probably going to change. In that future generations, they can't be priced out. The US dollar doesn't price people out because they're infinitely debasing over time. They have a 2% target market from the central bank, and they're going to be inflating 2% or more if they need it. In a blockchain, you don't have a central policymaker. So what do you do when you don't have a central policymaker pushing buttons and saying, the wind is blowing this way, so let me inflate 4%, or let me print this much money to, stimulate the economy. You have to model it out based on some other information that's deterministic over time. The only information we have is what's around us today, and what we're seeing with population growth is a real good metric for how much more money we need, how much more printing we need, and let it run itself, let it run its own course over time. So when a person first learns about this, there's a lot of philosophical and game theory and concepts of money that come into play. And then there's, after that, you're like, okay, well, I get the money side, I get the philosophy now. How do I build something on top? And that's where smart contracts come into play, and DeFi and all this sort of stuff. So as a new person, I would focus more on the game theory, the philosophy a little bit, the money side a little bit, and then get into how do I make money, or how do I build value? Because if you don't understand the beginnings, you won't understand the end. Or you don't understand what you're doing, why it's there. It's a tool. Is it a star screwdriver, or is it a flat screwdriver? And if you don't know what you're going to use to build with it, how can you know what tool to use, or even what that tool is? So generally, when you have these questions, we're there to help. But that's where I would start. That's where I started on understanding the problems around the monetary system today, why maybe Bitcoin solves some of those problems, and maybe where it's going in the future, and how we can apply new concepts on top. Anything else?
There's a lot of hype on NFTs right now.
NFTs? Yeah.
Do you think that's a good place for beginners to enter?
NFTs are like, it depends on which angle you look at it from. There's NFTs are being applied to art, right? Like I take Mona Lisa and I digitize that and I sell that. But they're also being applied to digital rights. They're being applied to gaming. They're being applied to a whole bunch of different things. Even digital identity. You can have an NFT and you have your information stored in the NFT, right? So it's a way for you to apply the methodology of I own something and it cannot change, and it represents physical, almost like a physical object. So it is a real good spot to kind of learn about the use cases of blockchain. You won't understand why the blockchain exists, but you'll be able to understand maybe why some of the value exists on top. Because I can create an NFT, and the NFT could be used either as art, or I could use it in a game. I could buy a shield in Fortnite and apply that same shield in a different game, like Roblox, and it transfers, it's composable, it's using one blockchain system, and securing the whole system using that layer 1 blockchain. So yeah, I agree, NFT is a real good spot to start.
Sorry if you already explained this. Like, how are you going to prevent your gas prices going up? Like, Ethereum gas prices, before Ethereum was using transfer gas.
Yeah.
How are you going to prevent your Syscoin?
No, awesome question, because this is the problem with all the blockchains. It's like when it starts to get used, what happened to Bitcoin? The fees went up, and what happened with crypto? When CryptoKitties in 2017 happened to Ethereum, pushes the gas price up. That's the first time that we hit the bottleneck of gas fees, right? CryptoKitties was like an NFT type of meme cartoons got created, and then they were put in like an artificial game, like Minecraft type of thing. It was just basically a collector's dream to own something that cannot change. Little cartoons, right? But it became a craze, and it pushed the fees up because there's only a certain amount of data you can store in the blockchain before that data becomes full and before people start competing. And when people compete, the fees go up. There's only so much resource you have, right? And what Ethereum is doing with these ZK and these roll-up solutions is they're saying, okay, well, we can expand the data on layer 1 so that more people can use it, but only to a certain point. Because after a certain point, everyone's computer has to become more and more expensive to be able to run this thing. And in the future, if you wanted to rerun everything to make sure it's intact, the security's there, that you can ensure that integrity of that blockchain is there, it takes you longer and longer, like weeks or months. Like Willie can tell you, it took us 3 months to sync up to an Ethereum node. That was using a $1,000 piece of hardware on the cloud, $1,000 a month. That's not feasible. In a modular design, where we start moving everything off of layer 1, we still keep security. We can start to remove the restrictions of using blockchain at layer 1 as a transaction processor. Right? We start to remove the restrictions of the fees. So we're saying, okay, well, if everything's on layer 2, there's a different fee market for layer 2. There's a different system on layer 2. And that system on layer 2 is more scalable. Because it doesn't need 1,000 nodes running on it. It doesn't have the same security system around it to secure the entire global network. It's maybe one black box running a ZK prover, and one black box running a ZK prover for your compliant use case. The fees could be negligible. Using the blockchain as a court system, you're doing 1 million transactions on layer 2, and you're putting one small proof on layer 1. Your fees on layer 1 drop to almost zero as a user. When I said economies of scale, what I really meant was when you have more and more users starting to use this system, it's got to become cheaper and cheaper. If it doesn't become cheaper and cheaper, it's going to get more and more expensive, and therefore you don't have a scalable system. The fees will go up. The only way to depress fees long term is if you have that economies of scale system built, where if everyone's using this system and tomorrow our kids are using the system, more and more people, more and more devices and IoT and AI bots, it becomes cheaper per user or per device or per bot. That's where we want to get to, and that's the tech that's now rolling out. And this is why, and you hit the nail on the head, where some of these other blockchains are coming out, the Avalanches, the FTMs, the Solanas of the world, and they say, hey, you know, super cheap fees. The problem is they don't have all the transactions Ethereum's ever had, and they don't have that bottleneck they've ever had. Some of them actually do real cool stuff to expand the amount of data that you could do, the amount of computation you could do, but it fundamentally is still the same thing. It's not apples and oranges, it's just a bigger apple or maybe a green apple versus a red apple. It's the same exact thing. You're going to run into the same exact problems. If you change the model with a mathematical solution and create economies of scale, that's the only way you can solve that problem. And you're going to see maybe next 6 months, the Ethereum fees are going to drop to minuscule amounts. Like literally, you won't have fees on Ethereum. They won't be an issue anymore. It's a good thing. And then people will question, why do you need another smart chain? That's the next question they'll have, right?
Another question. This is not about Syscoin, this is about the whole DLT system overall. What would make Facebook, Google, or any other network consider to switch over to Web 3.0 when they can't collect data user information at all?
Yeah, well, Google's taking away cookies, right? The next couple months, maybe they've already done it. But the private cookie problem where businesses can store the cookies in the browser, that's going away. They got a monopoly on that. So first of all, some of these other companies, they won't have a choice. They won't have a choice, but Web3 is the only choice. They got to be able to buy that data from the user. The only way to buy the user securely is through ZK. And these ZK identity solutions are going to be the next big things to be able to sovereignly keep your data and also sell it in the open market. So if the private cookie problem goes away, meaning I can't buy a book on you anymore, and I have to ask you for everything, then how do I ask you securely? It's through these mathematical concepts, right? But not only that, but what does that identity look like? Is it a government issue identity? Is it an identity I just created out of thin air and said, this is me? It's got to be rooted to the blockchain to say I've got a footprint on the blockchain, a first come, first serve. This is me, and no one else can copy me. And it's almost like a double spend problem, right? I have value on the blockchain at some given time. This was my address. I've signed on this address, and here's my picture and my ID, but you don't know anything about me. It's all encrypted to me. And if you want to know about me, you have to pay me. And Google is already making this problem relevant for the blockchain industry because the government is pushing down on them because of the data silo problem. The honeypots of information are so abundant right now. Hackers are having a field day just hacking them, and then, or someone like Facebook is able to steal it, feed it into the AI, and now the AI knows everything about you. And they already know everything about us right now. So the only way to battle that is to stop them from being able to store that as you browse and as you interact with the web. And in order to solve that effectively, they got to be able to buy that information from us without them recreating that book. They're going to create a book, but because of ZK, you can always change your own story without them knowing. So I think that's that honeypot of information, theft of information, theft of credits, theft of credit scores, that sort of stuff, is solved with blockchain identity with ZK tech. Probably, I know of a few people that are doing ZK plus identity, and we did that for a big bank here in Canada as well. It's rolling out Canada-wide actually, that solution, and it uses ZK to share information, and then a permission ledger like Hyperledger to store your identity, like first come, first serve. But they also want to do this with Ethereum, like using ENS, Ethereum names system. So those solutions are already starting to come out, and all the governments are doing this right now. All the governments are researching this. We've participated in RFPs with the U.S. government, Homeland Security, Canadian governments, but we went to Bahamas to deal with them. They're all looking at these problems right now. In 3 to 5 years, we solve problem, and data theft won't be as big of a problem. And I participated in a few census. They were asking about the problems, and people are becoming aware of them. At least in the UK and Europe, it's becoming very aware that I want to store my own information. I don't want to give it up. And the honeypots are abundant, and Facebook's controlling our lives basically by pushing the advertising based on AI. And I think there's a 60-40 split where 60% of people now are saying, no, I don't want to give up my information. I need to be monetized some way and secure my information, monetize it when I give it up. So it's a shift in how we're. I think when our kids grow up, they're going to be in a world where the Gen Zs are already protectionist, right? They're already saying, no, if you want me to do something, pay me or figure out a way. I'm not going to do anything for free. They're already in that mindset, and the next generation after that is going to be completely privacy based. You got to work with me. I don't have to work with you mentality. Anything else? Let's see here. Yeah, no, I think so. ZK, we're kind of behind the ZK Sync 2 protocol, and ZK Sync 2 is kind of like the first ZK EVM, which will allow us to scale smart contracts with ZK, and that's the biggest moment this year for the blockchain industry. It's huge. So once that tech comes out, we're gonna port some of the usefulness of Syscoin's data solutions, the data availability. We put a paper out called Proof of Data Availability, and we are going to port that to the ZK solution, and that's going to be our first decentralized rollup. So, the thing was last year or 2 years ago, ZK Sync 1 started to come out, and they put out guidance on when ZK EVM is going to come. I've extrapolated that they were going to be able to do ZK EVM before they even announced it, and also speaking with the team. So ZK EVM was announced last year as a Q1 objective, right? Q1 was, it was going to come out, actually Q4 of the 2021. Q1 was last, kind of like a probably the worst case scenario. Now, I think they had some issues with their prover and making it parallel, having multiple parallel provers. And so they've entered the public testnets, and we're now waiting for the testnet to mature enough for us to agree that it's secure to roll it on the mainnet. We don't want to roll this stuff out and then have it break down on us. We need to have it fully secure and stable and audited. Even if one line of code changes, we need to get it re-audited. That's what Matter Labs is focused on. And in our communications, it's consistent that we're focusing on getting this thing out in a secure way. It's not a race, the turtle or the hare, we are the turtle. We're trying to win the race in a secure, stable way and not try to rush it. So we're 100% focused on the initiative, and we're doing a whole bunch of things behind the scenes to prepare for the event. But that is the moment we're all kind of waiting for is the release of the ZK EVM. And we will have our own iterations of ZK EVM, compliant ZK EVMs, other versions of ZK EVMs that have decentralization, maybe a compliant non-decentralized version, other attempts of securing the data, a whole bunch of different ways we'll be able to solve the problem. But we need the base layer tech out there first. And these guys the smart guys are working on these problems. So when you're saying is when, is basically you're asking when is the security of the ZK EVM good enough for us to announce to the world and have people putting real money on the line using it. You guys have anything else? No? All right, well, I think we're pretty good. And thanks for joining us, coming out. And, we'll be doing more AMAs, maybe even different locations. We'll be giving away Sys just to have people come in and join. Thanks for joining us on YouTube as well. And some of you will probably see in Dubai. We've got some cool stuff coming and the announcements coming in Dubai as well. Really exciting. Yeah, we're really excited. This next little bit for the whole industry is going to open a lot of eyes. We're focused on getting the tech to the retail market now in a scalable way. I think first few phases were focused on institutional investors, getting the smart money in, those smart money's in. Now the focus is on bringing the value to everyday people, getting it scalable enough and usable enough so everyday people can enjoy the value that it's going to create. Thank you guys. Thanks.